My best friend, the brother I'd chosen. He was with my wife. In my bed, in the home I had spent every waking moment of the last year dying to get back to. I didn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stood there, a ghost in my own doorway, watching the last 12 months of my life, the last 8 years of our marriage, the entire foundation of my world dissolve into dust and ash right before my eyes. The silence I had carried home from the desert was now shattered by a noise that existed only inside my skull, the deafening, soul-crushing sound of my own heart breaking into a million pieces. I must have made a sound, a choked gasp, maybe the slightest shift of my weight, because in that instant, Mark froze, and Chloe's eyes, hazy with a pleasure that was never meant for me, fluttered open and looked straight past Mark's shoulder, straight at me. Her expression shifted so fast. First, confusion, then disbelief. For 6 long months, the desert was my world. The sand, the sun, the endless horizon. Out there, under the relentless heat, you cling to whatever gives you hope. For me, it was a single, dog-eared photograph. A picture of my wife. Her smile was my sunrise. The first thing I saw when I woke up, and the last thing I saw before I closed my eyes. Her memory was my shield against the loneliness, the fear, the sheer exhaustion of it all. I served my country, but every single day, I was just counting down the moments until I could return to her. Then, a miracle. My leave came through early, a whole month sooner than expected. My mind immediately started racing. This was my chance. The perfect opportunity for the ultimate surprise. No calls, no texts, no warning whatsoever. I imagined just walking through that front door, dropping my bags, and seeing the shock and pure joy light up her face. We'd run into each other's arms, just like in the movies. I pictured it 1,000 times on the long journey home. That single image kept my heart pounding with excitement through every flight, every layover. When I finally stood on our doorstep, keys in hand, the world felt still. The neighborhood was quiet, just the gentle hum of a Saturday afternoon. I turned the key, pushed the door open, and whispered, "Honey, I'm home." But the only answer was silence. The house was too quiet. A strange, hollow feeling started to creep into the edges of my excitement. I dropped my bags in the hallway, my boots echoing on the hardwood floor. Where could she be? And then I heard it, a sound from upstairs. Laughter, her laughter. But it wasn't the sweet, familiar sound I had replayed in my memory for half a year. This was different. It was a breathless, unrestrained giggle, a sound I hadn't heard since we were first dating. A cold dread, colder than any desert night, washed over me. My hands grew clammy. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. My training kicked in. Move quietly. Assess the situation. I crept up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. Each step was a lifetime. I reached our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. The laughter came again, closer this time, intertwined with a man's low murmur. My world tilted on its axis. My breath caught in my throat. With a hand that trembled, I pushed the door open. And what I saw in there, in our bed, in the home I fought to protect, it didn't just break my heart. It shattered my entire reality. I came home from one war, only to find another, more personal battle waiting for me. The desert had a way of baking silence into your bones. It wasn't that peaceful kind of quiet you get in the countryside. It was heavy, expectant, like the air right before a storm. For 12 long months, as Sergeant Alex Carter, that silence was my only real companion. But now, sitting in this cab, gliding through the clean, tree-lined streets of my hometown in Ohio, the silence inside me was totally different. It was fragile, hopeful, and it was swelling with the image of my wife's face. I had dreamed of this exact moment in the relentless desert heat. The memory of Chloe was my personal oasis. Her laugh. Man, her laugh. I used to trace the sound on her lips with my finger. It was my lullaby through so many long, dark nights. I held on to the feel of her hand in mine, the way her head fit perfectly in the crook of my neck, the smell of her shampoo on our pillows. These were the things I fought for, not for flags or big political ideas, but for the simple, beautiful, ordinary life I had with her. My plan was simple, perfect. I managed to get home 2 days early. A little miracle I pulled off with a sympathetic CO. I wasn't going to call. No warning. I was just going to appear. I imagined her face over and over on the long flight home. The shock, the disbelief, the tears of pure joy. It was a better movie than anything they were showing on the seatback screen. The cab pulled up to the curb, 1414 Maple Drive. The house looked the same, but different. Different. The lawn was immaculate. The flower beds under the bay window bursting with color. I'd asked my best friend, Mark, to keep an eye on the place, to help Chloe with the heavy stuff. Looks like Mark really took the lawn care job to heart. A small, warm feeling of gratitude spread through me. That was Mark for you. Reliable, a brother from another mother. We went through basic training together. He was the one person in the world I trusted without question. I paid the driver, hoisted my heavy duffel bag onto my shoulder, and walked up the familiar path. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a drum solo. I fumbled for my keys, the metal feeling cool and almost foreign in my hand after so long. I slid the key into the lock, and the click sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet afternoon. The house smelled of lemony polish and something else. A faint, unfamiliar cologne. I pushed the thought aside. Maybe it was a new air freshener or something. I dropped my duffel bag by the door with a soft thud. The house was completely silent. "Chloe," I called out, my voice echoing a little in the foyer. No answer. She was probably out shopping, or maybe at the gym. A grin touched my lips. Even better. This gave me time to get settled, maybe even grab some flowers, and be waiting right here for her when she walked in. I moved through the living room. It was spotless, almost sterile, a far cry from the cozy, slightly messy space we'd shared. On the mantelpiece, our wedding photos smiled back at me in my dress uniform, her in a simple white dress, both of us looking so impossibly young and so certain of our future. My eyes started to sting. I was home. I was finally home. I decided to head upstairs, dump my gear in the bedroom, and take a long, hot shower in my own bathroom. Wash the last bit of the desert down the drain for good. As I started up the stairs, the silence began to feel different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded thick. You could almost feel it in the air. Then I heard it, a faint, rustling sound from behind the closed door of our bedroom. My breath hitched. She was home. My grin came back, even wider this time. This was Italiano. The big surprise. I crept up the last few steps, my combat boots making no sound on the plush carpet. I was going to open the door, and there she'd be, maybe reading a book, maybe napping. I could just see her jolting up, her eyes going wide, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. I reached for the doorknob, and it was then that I heard it, a low, masculine murmur. Then, the soft, unmistakable sound of my wife's laughter. But it wasn't the laugh I remembered. This was different. It was intimate, throaty. A sound I honestly hadn't heard in years. It was a sound that stopped me cold, my hand freezing just an inch from the brass knob. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "Mark is over," I thought. My brain was scrambling, desperately trying to find a rational explanation. They're probably just talking. Planning the welcome home party for me. Yeah, that had to be it. But the laughter came again, followed by a creak of the bed springs. A sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat. Every muscle in my body tensed up. My training kicked in gnosis the situation. Identify the threat. But this was a threat they don't give you a manual for. Slowly, silently, I pushed the door open. Just a crack, just enough to see, and the world stopped. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, the one we'd picked out together, casting a golden, almost cruel light on the scene. Our bed, our king-sized bed with the dark gray duvet cover, I remembered her insisting on, and in it, tangled in those very sheets, were two people. Chloe, her fiery auburn hair, the color of a sunset I'd dreamt of for months, was fanned out on my pillow. Her face, the face I had crossed oceans and deserts just to see again, was turned towards a man whose broad, bare back was to the door. A back I knew all too well, a back I'd patched up after a stupid bar fight in college, a buck I'd trusted to watch my six, in life, if not in Warmark. My best friend, the brother I'd chosen. He was with my wife, in my bed, in the home I had spent every waking moment of the last year dying to get back to. I didn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stood there, a ghost in my own doorway, watching the last 12 months of my life, the last 8 years of our marriage, the entire foundation of my world dissolve into dust and ash right before my eyes. The silence I had carried home from the desert was now shattered by a noise that existed only inside my skull, the deafening, soul-crushing sound of my own heart breaking into a million pieces. I must have made a sound, a choked gasp, maybe the slightest shift of my weight, because, in that instant, Mark froze, and Chloe's eyes, hazy with a pleasure that was never meant for me, fluttered open, and looked straight past Mark's shoulder, straight at me. Her expression shifted so fast. First, confusion, then disbelief, and finally, a sheer, unadulterated terror that was somehow more devastating than any anger she could have shown. Alex, my name was a whisper on her lips, a question and a confession all at once. Mark spun around, his face a mask of pure shock and guilt. Oh, God. Alex, it's not what it... But the words were just noise, empty sounds in the wreckage of my life. I looked from my wife's horrified face to my best friend's panicked one. My gaze drifted to the nightstand. I saw a silver bracelet, a little trinket I'd sent Chloe from Germany. Next to it, a watch I'd given Mark for his 30th birthday. The symbols of my love and loyalty, side by side. Casualties in this. These disaster, I didn't say a word. What words were there? The searing heat of the desert, the constant weight of my rifle, the ever-present fear of combat, none of it had prepared me for this. This was a different kind of war zone, a silent, intimate, and utterly annihilating one. I took a step back, then another. My movements felt robotic, completely disconnected from my mind. It was like watching someone else in a movie. "Alex, please," Chloe cried out, scrambling to pull the sheet over herself, as if that could hide the truth. I turned away from the plea in her voice. I couldn't bear it. I walked back down the stairs, each step feeling like I was wading through wet cement, heavy and slow. In D4, I picked up my duffel bag, the bag that contained all my worldly possessions, the dog tags that identified me, the folded flag that represented my duty. It all felt so meaningless now. Just things. I opened the front door and stepped back out into the bright, ordinary afternoon. The sun was still shining. A neighbor was mowing their lawn, the sound buzzing peacefully in the air. The world was just going on. As if nothing had happened, as if my entire world hadn't just ended in the space of a single, stolen minute. I didn't know where I was going, primera. De no plan. I just started walking. Leaving the house, the life, the two people I had loved most in this world, behind me. The soldier was finally home, but the man he used to be was forever lost on the battlefield of his own bedroom.
Alex walked. He didn't know for how long or in what direction. The neatly paved sidewalks of his suburb blurred into the busier streets of the town center. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a beautiful ending to the worst day of his life. He was numb, a ghost piloting a body that had been trained for everything except this. His feet, acting on a muscle memory deeper than conscious thought, carried him to a place he knew. Vinny's Bar, a dim, no-frills establishment that smelled of stale beer and disinfectant. It was where he and Mark had celebrated their high school graduation, where they'd watched countless football games, where they toasted his engagement to Chloe. Now, it was just a dark hole to crawl into. He slid onto a worn vinyl stool at the far end of the bar, dropping his duffel bag at his feet like an anchor. The bartender, a grizzled man in his 60s named Ray, ambled over. "What can I get you?" Ray asked, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Whiskey. Neat. Leave the bottle," Alex said, his own voice sounding hollow and foreign. Ray didn't bat an eye. He placed a glass and a bottle of mid-shelf bourbon in front of him. Alex poured a generous measure and downed it in one searing gulp. The heat bloomed in his stomach, a small, manageable pain that was a welcome distraction from the gaping chasm inside him. He poured another. The images played on a relentless loop behind his eyes. The sun on the sheets, the curve of Chloe's bare shoulder, the panicked look in Mark's eyes, the sound of his own name, a whisper of betrayal from his wife's lips. Each memory was a shard of glass, and the whiskey was just pushing him deeper. His phone, which had been on airplane mode since his flight, suddenly vibrated in his pocket. Then again, and again, a relentless, buzzing onslaught. He pulled it out. The screen was a mosaic of notifications. 12 missed calls, Chloe. 7 missed calls, Mark. 5 new voicemails. 23 new text messages. He didn't read them. He just stared at the screen, at the names that had once been his sanctuary. Now they were just triggers. He watched as another call came in. Chloe. Her picture, a selfie of them both laughing at a county fair, filled the screen. He felt a physical wave of nausea. He let it go to voicemail. Then, with a calm that terrified him, he opened the settings and blocked both numbers. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. He was on his third glass of whiskey when a new presence settled on the stool beside him. He didn't need to look to know who it was. He could feel him. "Alex." Mark's voice was strained, laced with a desperate anxiety. "Man, you can't just disappear. We need to talk, please." Alex didn't turn. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "There's nothing to talk about." "Mark." His voice was flat, devoid of the fury Mark probably expected. This was worse than anger. It was a void. "Look, it was a mistake, a huge, stupid fucking mistake. It happened. You were gone for so long. Chloe was lonely. I was just trying to be there for her, and one thing led to another." Alex finally turned his head. His eyes, cold and empty, met Mark's. "How long?" Mark flinched. "What?" "How long?" Alex repeated, each word a bullet. Mark looked down at his hands. 6 months. The number hit Alex with the force of a physical blow. 6 months. He had been sitting in a dusty outpost, writing love letters and counting down the days. For half of that time, she had been in her bed with his best friend. The deception wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a sustained, calculated campaign. "Get out of here, Mark," Alex said, turning back to his whiskey. "Alex, come on, we're brothers. We can fix this." Mark's voice rose, drawing a look from Ray down the bar. Alex let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Brothers don't do that. You stopped being my brother the first time you touched her." He picked up the bottle and his glass, stood up, and walked to a booth in the darkest corner of the bar, leaving Mark alone at the counter. After a minute, he heard the stool scrape back and the door to the bar open and shut. The texts started coming from unknown numbers. "Please," excuses. "Alex, please, I'm so sorry. I love you. Please come home so we can fix this." Chloe. "It was me, man. It was all me. I pressured her. Don't blame her. Please, just talk to me." Mark. He deleted them without reading past the first line. Their words were just more weapons. He paid Ray in cash, shouldered his duffel bag, and walked out into the cold night. He couldn't go to a hotel. His wallet still held a joint credit card, and the thought of her being able to track him was intolerable. He ended up at a motel on the edge of town, the kind that rented by the hour and accepted cash. The room was dank, smelling of mildew and cigarette smoke. He lay on the stiff, scratchy bedspread, still in his uniform, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. The numbness was starting to wear off, and in its place, a storm was brewing, a toxic mix of grief, rage, and a profound sense of loss that threatened to swallow him whole. Sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in that doorway. The images were so vivid, so visceral, he could almost smell them. He felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the beginnings of a panic attack, something he'd struggled with since his first deployment. The four walls of the motel room seemed to be closing in, mimicking the confines of a dusty armored vehicle. He focused on his breathing, a technique his therapist had taught him. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. He was a soldier. He was trained to survive. But how do you survive this? The enemy wasn't a faceless combatant in a foreign land. The enemy was the memory of his wife's smile and the ghost of his friend's loyalty. They had stolen more than his trust. They had stolen his home, his future, and the very man he thought he was. As the first light of dawn crept through the grimy window, Alex Carter made a decision. He wasn't going to let them destroy him. The mission had just changed. The new objective was simple: survive, and he was the only one he could trust to have his back.
The next 72 hours were a study in grim, methodical action. Alex operated on autopilot, the disciplined part of his mind taking over from the shattered emotional one. Survival was the mission. He found a cheap extended-stay motel further out of town, paying for a week in cash. His first stop was a bank branch where he withdrew the maximum daily limit from his personal savings, the account that had only his name on it. The joint account, the one he and Chloe shared for bills and their future, he left untouched. It felt contaminated. His next stop was a large electronics store. He bought a cheap prepaid burner phone. It was a symbolic act as much as a practical one. The soldier in him was severing lines of communication with the enemy. The man in him was building a wall around what was left of his heart. He spent a day in a public library, using their computers. He found a divorce lawyer, a woman named Evelyn Reed, whose website featured a photo of a stern, no-nonsense woman in her 50s and promised ruthless advocacy and complex marital dissolutions. He sent her a brief, clinical email outlining the basic facts: military, long deployment, adultery with a known party, no children, desire for a swift and total separation. Her office called him on his burner phone within the hour. He gave them the address of his motel. A courier delivered a thick manila envelope the next morning. Inside were the initial divorce papers. Seeing the words, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," with his and Chloe's names typed neatly in the appropriate boxes, was like a punch to the gut. It made it real, legal, and final. He signed where the sticky notes indicated, his hand steady, his signature an impersonal scrawl. He included a brief, typed letter instructing that all communication go through his lawyer, and that he was relinquishing any claim to the house and its contents. He wanted nothing from that tomb. He enclosed a cashier's check for the retainer. Then he walked to the nearest mailbox and dropped the envelope in the slot. The clang of the metal door felt like the closing of a vault. He was sitting on the edge of his motel bed, staring at the blank beige wall, when he heard the sound of a car pulling up too fast, gravel crunching under its tires. He didn't need to look. He knew. He had known this moment would come. He had just hoped to avoid it. A car door slammed, then another. Hurried footsteps approached his door. "Alex, I know you're in there. Please, open the door." It was Chloe's voice, ragged with tears and desperation. "Man, come on. This is insane. Talk to us." That was Mark. Alex remained seated. He didn't move. He just waited. The knob jiggled, then a fist started pounding on the flimsy wood. "Alex, please!" Chloe screamed. He could hear her sobbing on the other side of the door, great, heaving sobs that tore through the silence. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I love you. I never stopped loving you." Mark's voice joined in, trying to be the reasonable one. "Alex, we messed up. We know we did. But you can't just throw everything away. 8 years. We're family. Let us in. Let us explain." Explain. The word was so hollow it was almost funny. How did you explain 6 months of lies? How did you explain the desecration of every vow, every memory? The pounding continued for what felt like an eternity. Their pleas weaved together, a chaotic symphony of guilt and panic. They promised therapy. They promised it would never happen again. They begged for a second chance. Alex stood up. He walked to the door. The pleas stopped instantly, replaced by a tense, hopeful silence. He could feel them holding their breath on the other side. He didn't open the door. Instead, he spoke, his voice low, calm, and clear, carrying through the cheap wood. "It's over. The papers are filed. Don't come here again." The silence that followed was deafening, then a single broken whisper from Chloe. "Alex. No." He heard Mark mutter a curse, then the sound of their footsteps retreating. Car doors slammed, an engine roared to life and sped away, the sound fading into the distance. He was alone again. The confrontation was over, but he felt no sense of victory, only a profound and utter emptiness. He had held his ground, but the ground felt like ash. A week later, a formal envelope from his lawyer arrived at his motel. It contained a copy of a filed motion and a brief note from Evelyn Reed. Chloe, through her own lawyer, had accepted the terms. The divorce would be uncontested. She was keeping the house. It was done. There was nothing left for him in this town. The ghosts were too loud, the memories too painful. He packed his duffel bag, the same one he had carried home with so much hope. He got in his car, the one that had sat in long-term parking for a year, and he started to drive. He didn't have a destination. He just pointed the car west and left. He drove for days, through states he had never seen, the landscape changing around him. The tightness in his chest began to ease, just a little. The panicked flashbacks to the bedroom were slowly being replaced by the steady rhythm of the road. Weeks later, he found himself in a small town in Colorado, nestled at the foot of towering, snow-capped mountains. The air was crisp and clean. He rented a cabin. He got a job as a mechanic at a local garage, his hands finding solace in the simple, honest work of fixing engines. One evening, he was sitting on the porch of his cabin watching the sunset behind the peaks, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold. He held a pen and a notebook. For the first time, he wasn't writing a letter to Chloe. He was writing to himself, to the man that he had been, to the soldier who had come home. "I fought for a country. I lost a home. I thought the greatest battle was over there. I was wrong. The hardest fight was coming back to a world that had moved on without me. They betrayed me, but I did not betray myself. I am still standing. The war is over. My mission now is to live." He closed the notebook. The last light of day faded, and the first stars began to appear in the vast, clear mountain sky. They were cold and distant, but they were constant. For the first time since he turned the key in that door on Maple Drive, Sergeant Alex Carter took a deep, full breath and felt something that was not quite peace, but was a solid, unshakable beginning. The road ahead was long and unknown, but it was his, and that was enough.